Hi guys, Nikhil here. Welcome to Salesforce Troop. This is the third session of our Salesforce JavaScript Developer certification series. And today's topic is browser and events. And this topic covers 17% of overall exam. So let's move on to our agenda. So today we're gonna cover document object model, what is DOM. Then we'll see how we can manipulate the DOM. After that, we can see different types of event in the JavaScript. After that, we will see handling events in JavaScript. Then we'll see onload events. After that, we'll see how the event flow in the JavaScript. Then we'll create our own custom event. Then we'll see what all the objects given by the events. Then we'll go for BOM, that is browser object model, and we'll go through each and every API given by the browser object model, that is window API, set timeout, location API, navigator API, and screen API. So let's move on to the first topic, that is document object model. So when a page is loaded, the browser creates a document object model of the page. So whenever we write something in our HTML, whether it's a HTML tag or a div tag or a body tag, so browser take that HTML and it creates a tree of that HTML tags. So the HTML DOM model is constructed as a tree of object or nodes. So we usually call them as a nodes, and it provides API that allow you to add, remove, and modify parts of the document effectively. So when this document object model is ready in the browser gives us some API so that we can add and remove that nodes from that tree. And in this DOM tree, the document is the root node, and the root node has one child, which is the HTML element, and the HTML element is called document element. So let's go to our VS Code and see what exactly the DOM. So I have my VS Code, and one place I have my Chrome browser. So I'll do right click and open the inspect element, and I'll zoom it a little bit so that everything should be visible to you guys. I'll open the console. So here in the folder, I have a index.html, a plain HTML file, and everybody know the basic of HTML. So we are using doc type because it's the HTML5. Then we have a HTML tag, that is the document like root tag. Then after that, we have a head tag and a body tag. In body tag, I have created a script tag where I'm gonna write my JavaScript, and within the body tag I'm gonna write my HTML. So if I write a tag here, hello everyone, so this is the tag, and you can see immediately the text is ready in our browser now. So I was telling you like what is DOM. So as in the slide they mention, the document is the root node. So if I type a document in my console, let's see what it gives us back. So it gives us a tree structure that says HTML tag is the root node. So the whole tree start with the HTML tag. Within that you have head tag. With after that you have a body tag. So whatever we have written here, it's giving us back by the document tag. So this is what is DOM. And if you are confused what is DOM, if you go to the elements tab, whatever you see here, it's a DOM, document object model. And each tag is considered as a node. So if I say body is a node, body has a child node, that is div node, then a script node. So this is what DOM is. Let's go back to our slide, and at a high level I try to copy some structure. So at the top it's a document. I guess it's little bit blurry, but you guys can able to see. Then after that the root element is the HTML tag. Then HTML tag is divided into two further child, that are body tag and a head tag. In head tag usually we added title or some text if you want. In the body tag, whatever element we add, like we added div tag or a script tag, so that comes as a child node of the body tag. So internally it forms the tree structure of these nodes. So this is what DOM is. Let's move on to our second topic. So in the previous slide, we have seen DOM gives us, or document gives us, an API that allow us to add, remove, or modify the part of a document effectively. So to add, remove, and these API, when we use, we called it as a DOM manipulation because we are manipulating the nodes of the DOM. So there are many APIs given by the DOM. So, but we are using here the selected one that I guess it's important from the exam point of view. So we'll cover all type of manipulation, but from each section I have picked 2 or 3 APIs. Okay. So first is selecting an element. So from the DOM, how we can select an element. So there are many ways, but the most common ways are query selector, query all, selector all, get element by ID, get element by class name. So let's go to our code again and see how to achieve that. So we are in our code again. And so first we'll see in script tag, I can create another JS file as well, but I'm okay with the script tag. So in script tag, I'm gonna write my JavaScript, and above that I'm gonna write my HTML. Okay, so we said we are learning right now a DOM manipulation and how we can select an element. So there is first way to select that. I'll zoom it a little bit more. So the first way is fetch an element using an ID. So fetch an element using an ID. Suppose I have an element here. I'll give this name, give an ID to this element with the ID attribute, and I have given the ID as hello. So if I want to fetch this element, I can write document, because we these all method that we're gonna use here is coming from the DOM. So DOM is nothing, it's a document. So root element is document. So document dot get element by ID, and just pass the ID name. So it will return me the whole element. Okay. I'll store that element in the element ID, and if I console this, now you can see it's printing me the whole element with the ID. Or if you want to see it here, you can directly run this script directly in the console, and you will see it returns us the whole element that has the ID. So this is a way how we can query by ID. Now let's move on to the second way of fetching it. Now we're gonna fetch it with the class name. Okay, I'll convert this ID to a class, because class is important because you can use same class multiple time in a single DOM or a single HTML, but every time ID should be unique. So class is very helpful when you are styling same thing to a multiple elements. Now let's go to the second. I'll remove this and I'll say fetch element using class, and for that we have document. Again we are using a document API, document dot get element by class name, and I'll pass the class name here, hello, and I'll save that in an variable element class, and we'll console this. And now you can see it's returning an element, but it's returning an element in the form of array like structure, because a class can be of can be applied to many elements. So if I say I have many element, hello guys, hello all. So I have three elements in my HTML and all have the same class. Now if you see the console, it's returning the three elements with the same class. And so always remember, get element by class name returns the elements in the array form, and id returns only a single one because id is always unique. Okay, there are many different APIs given by document. So other doc, things are like document dot get element by tag name. So if you query it with the tag name, you just pass the tag name that you want. It also returns the elements in the array form. But it was very difficult to remember when to use tag name, when to use class name, when to use id. To solve this issue, JavaScript introduced another way called query selector. So it says fetch element use, let's use query selector now. Let's see how it works. Let's use this. Yeah. So JavaScript introduced the query selector, and query selector say just tell me what you want. Just pass me the selector in a proper format. So let's see what is proper format here. So I'll say one ID, say hello. Hello, okay. And then after that, I'll give some class name, my class and my class. We have three elements here right now. So first thing is query selector that says I'm also an method of document. Use me by calling query selector. S should be capital. And pass me here your selector. So in JavaScript, we call ID with the hash. So if I say hello, okay, and I'll store it in a variable called by ID. I'll console it, console.log by ID. It return me the same thing that we were getting using a document.getElement by ID, but it's a very simple thing to remember, like easy naming convention. I would say query selector, just query this thing. The only catch here is query selector allow you to find the first element based on the selector. It works with ID, class, or any combination. So suppose I have my class. There are two my classes are available, but if I use my class as a selector in my query selector, remember the class can be queried by the dot notation, and we'll say query selector by class, and now it's returning only one class. And which class it's returning, we can check that by a inner HTML. So it's returning me the first one. As I said, query selector allow you to find the first element based on the selector. So it started querying from top to bottom, and it's find the first element and it returned that element. It didn't go to the second element. So query selector always return the first element in the search. Likewise, you can query the tag as well. If I say div tag, instead of remembering the get element by tag name, it's easy, just pass a selector name and we'll say it by tag name, and we'll tag name, and now it's returning the first tag that is in the element. So hello everyone. So query selector is very helpful when you want to find the first element. Now if we want all the element that matches our query, so JavaScript introduce query selector all. So fetch elements using query selector all, and the syntax is same. We'll say query selector all, find all the selectors that has div tag, and If you print this, it returns an node list that is array like structure. It's not exactly an array, it's an array like structure. So it's find all the div in the DOM and it returns all the array of DOMs. Similarly, if I say only find me an ID, hello, hello is only at one element, so it returns a one node list. Similarly, if I say find me the class and it returns me my class is small, it returns both the classes that has my class as a class. So two node list has returned. This is how we can query. We can fetch the elements from the DOM. So we have seen four types. First is the old way, like get element by ID or get element by class name. But the new way of querying it is the query selector and the query selector all. So let's move on to our slides back. So now we'll see how we can traverse the DOM, like how we can find whether it's a child or the last child, first child or a parent if we want to traverse from top to bottom or bottom to top. So let's go to our playground again, and now we'll see how we can traverse. Now we'll see traversing of element. I'll clear my structure. Now I will say I'll find the child of body tag. So body tag has many childs, three divs and one script. So if I want to query that, I'll say document dot query selector. We'll say return me the body tag. Anyhow, body tag is single, so it will return me the only one element. I'll say body tag, and I'll console it first. So now we have the body tag from the DOM. Now I want all the children. So if you want to see who all are the children of this body tag, you just use a property called children. So it returns all the children in a array like structure or a node list. So now you can see it has a div with hello ID, two divs with the my class, then the script tag and script ending. So this is how you can traverse from parent to child. Or if you want to see only the first element, like give me the first element or a first child of a body tag, so you have a property called first element child, and it returns the first element of that child. So likewise, there are many APIs. We'll not cover in all, but at a high level, this is how you will traversing your DOM. Let's go back to slide quickly. Then after that, we'll see how we can manipulate the element. So first we learn how to fetch the element. Then we'll see how we can travel in between the elements. Now we'll see how we can change the data of the element. Okay, let's go back to our playground. And now we'll see manipulating the elements. I'll remove this quickly. So the first property is inner text. We'll see. So again, I'll use document dot query selector. Query selector is the recommended way nowadays. I'll say find my class. Okay. And we'll say let manipulation equal to. So I created a variable that hold that element. I'll console that manipulation. query selector always fetch the first one. Otherwise, we can go with the ID itself. That makes more sense. And I'll give this a shorter name, hello. That makes more readability. Okay, now we are querying a first element that has class ID, and then we are printing it in the console. Now, if I want to replace the text of this tag, so right now the text in between these tags is hello everyone, but if I want to pass something else, then I will say a property called inner text. T should be caps text. And when you are just defining the property, it just brings us the text of that particular element. And now if I want to change that, you just say hooray. And now you see on the screen, I'll zoom it a little bit. Now the text everyone is replaced by the inner text that we are overriding here with the hooray, and in the console also we are seeing the hooray now. So this is how you can manipulate the data. So in this particular case, we are changing the text in between the tags. Similarly, if you want to add some text with the HTML tag, that also you can do using a property called HTML, inner HTML. And just remember, HTML is capital altogether. And if I say HTML and without any HTML tag, it will work in the same way as inner text was working. But now suppose I say add a div, hey hooray, I'll close the div. So now in this case, you can see hey hooray is coming. And if I print quickly my element here, now you can see that we are adding an extra div in between the element div that has an ID hello. So inner HTML will help you to add an HTML in between the elements. But the same thing if I try to do with text, inner text, it will consider these tags as a string, and it print the tags as well on the screen. Now you can see on the screen. So these are the two common property you may encounter in the exam as well. And this is how we manipulate the data. Now let's go back to our slide. Now we already seen how we manipulating the elements. Now we'll see how we can manipulate the attributes, because attributes plays a major role when we play around with a tag, anchor tags and other stuff. So let's go and see this. And to understand that, we'll create an attribute here. So we'll say, so when now we are seeing manipulating attributes. So attributes are the, like ID is an attribute of this div element, class is another attribute. And if you work with LWC, you would have seen many times this attribute called variant, and it's called, give any name. I have given the brand. Okay, and I'll remove this. Say let element equal to query the id hello, so it will bring me this element. Okay, and I'm just printing it right now. So now we gonna learn manipulating attributes. So first thing we gonna learn how we can get the attribute to our code. So first tag we are learning get attribute, not the tag but the property. So if you want to fetch an attribute from an element, so there is a property called get attribute. So I'll say document dot query selector hello and say get attribute, and it takes a parameter called the attribute name. So if I want a attribute variant from an element that has an id hello, and it will return me the attribute value. So get attribute takes the attribute name, and in return it will return us the value of that attribute. So if that attribute is not available, it usually returns null. So variant one is not available, but variant is available. So this is a get attribute. Similarly, if you want to set something, so if you want to set something, change get to set, but set takes two parameter. First parameter is the attribute name and second is the value. So I said, okay, go to the element, find the element that has an id hello and set a attribute variant with the value success. Okay, and now if I go my element tag, and if I see, now you can see the variant got changed from brand to success. So this is how we can dynamically set the attribute and get the attribute. And this is how we can manipulate with the attribute. If it's a h tag, or if it's a tag, sorry, anchor tag, and if you want to change the URL dynamically, you can do in the same way. So let's move on to the next point of our slide. So the next point is manipulating element style. And in the exam, you definitely get this question, because in my exam, I faced, I guess, one question from this section. So let's go back our playground. So now we'll see how we can manipulate element style. Manipulating elements style. I'll remove everything here from the start. So we have now the same three elements in our HTML, and I'll query the first element again with the hello selector, that id hello, and I'd say, okay, find this element, take the style property, take, set the font size of this to 40 pixel. So this is how we can dynamically set the style. So there is a style property, and style has the many attribute, and one of them is, like, style has many properties. One of them is font size. It can be border, it can be border radius, anything, but I'm using font size, and I said, okay, change the style property font size to 40 pixel for the element that has an id hello. So now you can see the size is 40 pixel. This is how you can change the font size. And then there is a property, just remember this property that I'm going to tell now, called visibility. First property is visibility. Now I said, okay, go to the same element, set the style visibility equal to hidden. So now you are not able to see that element that has hello everyone, but the space is still consumed. So what visibility property does, it just hide the text but not remove the code from the DOM. So it means the space is already taken but the element is hidden. Okay, and if you want to make it visible, there is a visible property. Now if I say visible, it will be visible. Similarly, there is another property called display. And what display does, display says just hide my space as well. So now you can say the hello everyone element is removed from the screen as well as the space is gone. So in my exam, the question was something like, I want to hide an element, and what is the better way you can do that so that the space should not be visible. So remember the option were like visibility, none, visibility, visible, visibility hidden, or display none, or display block. So display block has two property. Just remember this. One is none to hide that element and block to show that element. Now there is flex as well, but you remember these two. And visibility has two values. One is visible when you want to show that element, and another one is hidden when you want to hide that element. Okay, so this is a important question from exam point of view. That's why we always prefer display none when we are filtering the list, because we want to remove those lists from the loop. Otherwise, if we go with the visibility, the space will be there and it looks empty in some places in the list. So just remember, display none is preferable way for hiding or hiding the list in during the filtering, and very important from the exam point of view. So the next one is class list. Next property is class list. There was, I guess, there was one question from class list as well. So now, if I want to find the classes, like how many classes are on a particular element, or what are all the classes are on an element. Suppose I have my class, hello class, many classes are available. Okay, and to fetch that, suppose I'll say document.query selector, find an element that has an ID. Hello, I'm using ID because it's easy to write. And I'll say, okay, give me the class list. What all the classes this element has. Okay, so if I console it directly, and I'll check the console, it will say you don't have any class, the length is 0. So, but at the same time, if I change this variant to class, it returns me immediately a length 1 with the class name brand. Okay, so you can fetch all the classes to a particular element using a class list property. And in the exam, they may ask you how you can add the class or remove the class dynamically. So to add the class, there is a property to a class list called add. And if I say add a show class to the element with ID hello, and now if I go to element and check, now you can see this class got added here, that show. So earlier only in the code was brand, but using the class list dot add property, we are adding the show class. And similarly, we can remove the show class or the brand class. I'll say brand, remove the brand class from an element. So if I go here and now I'll see the class is empty, the class list is empty. So this is how we'll add and remove the classes dynamically in JavaScript. Let's go back to our slide. So this is at a high level how we play with the document object model, or the DOM in short. So we have covered how to select an element, how to traverse an element, how to manipulate the element, how to manipulate the attributes, and then we'll play around with the styling and the classes. Let's move on to the next topic. So the next topic is JavaScript events. And an event is an action that occur in the web browser, which the web browser feedbacks to you so that you can respond to it. For example, when a user click a button on a web page, you may want to respond to that click event by displaying an alert box. So event is some action that you are taking on your website, like when you on an e-commerce website you click on add to cart, some action is happening that the particular item that you want to buy it gets added to the cart, or on click of a button you just want to show an alert message, are you sure? Or in Facebook on click of login you are trying to log in to the Facebook. So that all action that you are playing around with the button, it can be a mouse down, mouse over, or a drag and drop, all are the events. And event handler is a block of code which execute when the event occurs. So when you click, what should happen, that code is written in a function, and that function called event handler. Let's move on to the next slide. So now we'll see how to handle event in JavaScript. So there are three ways of handling an events in the JavaScript. First approach, the most commonly used, that is HTML event handler attribute. So in which we typically add an attribute to our HTML tag, and on click of that we call that particular function. So event handler typically have a name begin with the on, event handler typically have name that begin with on. So if you want to uh, use an event called click, then you have to append a on in front of that click. If you want a mouse over, you have say on mouse over, on click. So these are the event handler attribute. Let's go to our playground and see. So now we'll see HTML event handler attributes. So I'll remove this everything. Our script tag is empty, a fresh one. And now I'll say I'll create a button. I'll remove this all HTML tags as well. Click me. This is a button. Now button is ready in our browser. Now I want an action on this button, or I want a click action on the button. So I would say on click. So click is the action, and action always start with the on. So we said on click, and then we define our event handler show alert. Okay, and now I'll go to my JavaScript. I'll create a function. We call this as event handler. I'll give the function name show alert, and the show alert will call alert method. Hey guys, and now our function is ready. So when I click this button, it should trigger an alert method, and that should print hey alert, hey guys. So now if I click, it's not working because we missed the brackets here, calling brackets. Now if I click, now you can see hey guys, the alert message is coming. So this is how we add an event handler attribute. So event handler attribute is nothing, it's an on click, it's an event, and that has a handler called show alert, and show alert will print the alert method in the JS file. Let's go and see the second way, that is event handler in the JavaScript. So if I remove this, I'll say I still have a button, and I want to attach an event to this button, and now we are using actually event handler by property. So now we are adding an event to a property. Okay, so now my button is there and I want to add an event handler to this button. So first I'll fetch this element, and now you guys know how we can fetch that element using document.query selector, and we'll say fetch me the button, and it's better to give the ID. I would say btn is the ID, and fetch the button btn, and I'll call it as let btn. Now I have that element in the btn variable, and now we are learning event handler as a property. So I'll say btn dot on click. So btn returns an object and I'm attaching a property to that object on click. What should happen? It should alert a message. A message can be anything. It says clicked. So this is the second way by which we can add the event handler. So the each element has event handler property such as onClick. To assign an event handler, you set the property to a function as we are showing here. And in this case, the function become a method of the button element, and therefore this is equivalent to the element. So if we print this here, so it become the element who is triggering that. We have seen already how this behave to an element in our previous video. So now if I click button again, now it trigger the alert called clicked. So next, let's go to the next way of adding the event. And now we'll see how we can add the event listener. So now we are seeing how we can add an event listener, and this is one of the most recommended way while you are writing a JavaScript code, especially when you are working with the libraries, because this approach gives us a lot of freedom to add and remove the handler. Because in earlier way when we add our event as an attribute, you can't remove that as such. Otherwise you need to write an extra code for removing it. You will first get the attribute, or then you set or remove the attribute. But this approach that we're gonna learn, it's very important from the exam point of view as well as in your interview or the coding point of view. So the first method is we're gonna learn here is add event listener method. So add event listener method accepts three arguments: an event name, an event handler function, and a boolean value that instruct the method to call the event handler during the capture phase or during the bubble phase. So if you didn't understand what I mean, I'll show you the syntax first. So the syntax is on an element, any element on which you want to add an listener or event listener, you will call a method event listener. Event listener takes three arguments. First is the event, what event you want to handle or listen. It can be a click, it can be a key down, key up, mouse over, blur, focus, anything. Then second argument is the function. So on click, suppose on this event occur, what should happen? That code you write on this function. And there is a third property, that is whether to capture, it's in a capture phase or a bubble phase. So you can ignore this for time being because we're gonna cover this very soon. So let's see how we can add an listener. So I'll say again the same code till query button, and I'll say create a function called show alert, and that function will alert a clicked. And then I'll say on button add an event listener. So button is the element that we query earlier, and we are saying now add an event listener. Event name is click. Whenever the click happen, just call this method show alert. And what this method does, it trigger the alert method. So let's go and see if it's working, and it's working. So this is how we can add an event. Similarly, you can remove an event. So JavaScript, write the code from top to bottom. So I'll just write the second code here, the second way of removing the event handler. So when the JavaScript start reading the code, it already added the handler here. But if I removed it after this, so the click should not work. Okay. So the second method is remove event listener, and the exam they will ask you how you can remove the listener. Okay. And in my exam it was there. So there was a question something like, there is a function in which I want the click to be run only one time, and after that that click should not work again and again. So how you gonna do that? You will just add the add event listener, and once the click is done or the click count is 1, you just remove that event. And to remove that event, I'll create another button. I'll say remove. I'll say remove. So first we'll see whether the click is working, and in click of remove, I'll remove the event handler from the click me button. Okay, and similarly, we'll query the remove button. We'll call it remove, and we'll say remove. I'll give it as a more meaningful name as remove button. Remove button dot add event listener. First, we'll say listen to the click on remove button, and then this is the inline way of adding the function, and we'll say whenever somebody clicks the remove button, then run this logic here. And here the logic is go to the button, that is btn, that is the first button, the click me, run the remove event listener, and what event we want to remove will pass, that is click, and what is the function of that event, that is show alert. Because we don't want only to remove the event, we want to remove the method as well, right? So we are passing the both ways. So what we are doing first, we are creating an event to our click me button. We're listening to that. After that, we create another button called remove button. On click of remove button, we are saying go to the button tag, that is click button. I'll give it a meaningful name here as well. Click button. Go to the click button and remove its event listener called click. So first I click, it's working. Again I click, it's working. If I click remove, and now if I click me, it's not at all working, because on click of remove, I remove the event handler. So this is how event handler works, and this is one of the best way, because you can remove the unwanted event listeners, and most of the library use this way for events. Let's go back to our slides. So we already cover event listener, events element handler property. We cover HTML event handler attribute. Let's go to the next slide. Now we'll see page load events. There was a question from this topic as well in my exam personally. So there are two types of event when the page loads or page unload. So when the page load, the first event that occur is the DOM content loaded, and there may be a question something related to the load event only. So the DOM content loaded event says the browser is fully loaded the HTML and complete the building the DOM tree. So this event triggered when the browser completely parse the HTML and load the HTML to the browser, or the DOM tree is ready in short. But in this case, it only check the tree is ready or not. It not check whether the like suppose an image is there in that tree, image is loaded or not. It just check whether the tags are rendered properly or not. And the second event is load event, and this event says the browser fully loaded the HTML and also the external resources like images and style sheets are ready. So this event checks whether the images are loaded or the style sheet or the JavaScript is loaded or not. And one more thing actually I have to tell you guys before I'll move ahead. Just remember, whenever we use the event listener, add event listener or remove event listener, will never write on click, on mouse over. It's always be a click, mouse over. In my exam, that was the confusion. Like they have given the option with add event listener or remove event listener. Just remember, with the event listener, you will not add the on property. So the on property only with the event handler attribute as well as the event handler property. Okay, just remember this. So we were talking about the load events. So there is a difference between these two. The DOM content load is only check the whether the tags are rendered or not. But the load events check whether the tags is rendered properly along with the resources like image is loaded, style sheet is loaded, or JavaScript is loaded or not. Similarly, the unload event when you are going away from the browser, there is before unload, before you are navigating, like suppose you want to ask them, are you sure you want to close this browser, and unload event fire once the DOM is um, gone, like DOM is not there at all in the page and it's about to close. It's already closed, you can say. And it's, let's go and see this example as well. Let's go to our playground. I'll remove the script tags, everything from in between, and I'll see, I'll remove this as well. And it's better I'll keep this button at least. Okay, first thing is from content loaded. And when we are talking about a page event, page is every time represent as a window. So if I say window, window is the page, the whole page that we are talking about here. Okay, so if I want to play around with the event, I need to attach the event to a window object. Okay, so first thing, we are checking DOM content loaded. So we'll say window dot add event listener. Which event I want? I want DOM content loaded, and the syntax is then the callback. I can use arrow function here as well, and I'll say when the DOM content loaded, just print the DOM is fully loaded. Okay, then after that, I'm saying that O is cap. Just make sure like you're writing DOM and C is capital, rest is small, then L of the loaded is capital. So now you can see as I refresh the page and it shows the DOM is fully loaded. It means the DOM content is ready. And I don't have any scenario right now for to show how to differentiate whether the load and DOM content load is differ. Similarly, but I'll show you the syntax how you can use the load event. And remember, there is no on in event name when you are using add event listeners. The same syntax, but instead of DOM, you will see the load. So the always the event that trigger is the DOM content loaded, and after that only the page is fully loaded. The load event triggers. Okay, load event checks whether the resources are ready or not, like images and style. I already mentioned it. Then there is before unload, and for before unload, we'll we'll try to achieve this scenario quickly. Here also the syntax is same. I'll say I'll take the same signature and I'll give this name before unload. Like before you are unloading the content, do this. I'll say event and event dot prevent default. If you don't know what it does, just wait for a minute. There is a topic where I'm gonna explain what prevent default does. I'll say when the event dot return value is null, just trigger that. So what I'm gonna do here is I'll create a link here called Google on the screen, and when I click this I'll try to navigate to the google.com, but my window is listening. Before I'll go alert something, so this is a shorthand way of writing an alert using an event. So if I click now on Google, it will trigger changes you made not be saved, leave site. So this is when we are about to leave the page. So if I say leave, it will navigate to the google.com. Okay, so this is how before unload works. And similarly, there is another one, but we don't have any as a scenario right now that I can demonstrate you. That is our unload, which fires when the page has completely unloaded. So in the exam, they gonna ask you this question. So they'll create a scenario in which they'll say, "I have a website that is not loaded correctly. The the image is not loading properly. So which method should I used to check whether the content is loaded perfectly or not?" And they'll give you an option on DOM, on load, or DOM content and load. So remember, on DOM content loaded is not working with listeners, and on property will not add, especially with the events in the listener. I'm repeating it again and again because there will be two, three questions similarly around this. So you have to use the load, which says I'll wait when that HTML as well as the resources like pages or the style sheets are ready. I'll run that. Okay, so this is all about page load events. Then we'll see event flows, how events flow in JavaScript. So now we already seen how what is event, how event handler works, how to listen to event. Now we'll see how actually the event flows. So event flow explain the order in which events are received on the page from the element where the event occur and propagate through the DOM tree. There are two types of event model. First is the event bubbling, the second is the event capturing. And let's go and see what is event bubbling first. So event bubbling, in the event bubbling model, an event starts at the most specific element and then flow upward towards the least specific element. So suppose I have the structure, the document is a root, then we have HTML tag, body tag, div tag, and within the div tag I have a button. So if I click on my button, a specific element, my events will trigger up, 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 and up. And if there is a event listener to the div, that will also get triggered. So this is how event bubbling occurs, and all modern browsers bubble the event up to the window object or the document object. Okay. So if I click button, if there is a event listener to its parent, it will call that as well. If there is a event listener to the body, that also get called. So this is called event bubbling. Bubbling happen by default in the modern browser. Okay, let's go and see the example. And I'll clean this my script, and I'll remove everything my body tag as well. So I'll do one thing. I'll say I'll add a ID to my body. I'll create a div with the ID div wrapper, and the div has the button like we shown in the image in the slides, and that button has the ID button, and we'll say click me. So first we are seeing the event bubbling. Okay, so in event bubbling, first I'll say, okay, I'll query first the button, and now you already know how we can query the button. We'll say document.query selector button, then we'll add the event listener, Now you guys know how to add the event listener on the button. I'm using a add event listener, a click property that alerts it was clicked. That's good. Now call the another I'll query the another property called another element called div wrapper. I'll give this name div wrapper. So I'll comment it here. So it's button code div code, and similarly I'll attach event listener to our div wrapper, and I'll say div wrapper click, and then I'll do the same thing with the body tag body code. I'll copy this. We'll query the body tag with the body ID. We'll say body and attach the event listener to body. So right now what we are doing here is we are attaching three events to the three element, first to the button, second is to the div, and third to the body. Okay, and we said when you hit the particular element, its event propagate to the root. So while propagating, if there is another listener or an event handler, it triggers that event handler as well. So according to this theory, if I click a button, it should trigger the event for the div wrapper as well as the body, because we have attached explicitly three events. Okay, so let's go and click the button click me. So it's a bubbling, so it will go from top from bottom to top. Okay, so it's bubbling from down to up. So if I say click, so first it encounter, okay, there is an event handler to the button, it trigger alert it was clicked. I said okay, then he immediately it's trigger the another, that is div wrapper clicked, because it's bubbling the event, and similarly it clicks div wrapper clicked. So this is how event bubbling happen. And actually the event flow explain the order in which events are received on the page from the element where the event occur and propagate through the DOM tree. So this is the DOM tree, and it's explaining us how our event is propagating in the DOM tree. Okay, so let's go back to the slide. Just now we have seen the bubbling, and remember the bubbling happened from down to up. Let's go to the another one, that is capturing phase. By default this phase is off, bubbling is by default happens, and in this phase an event start at least specific element. It start at the least specific element and flow downward towards the most specific element. So suppose if I click on a button, it will start listening an event from top to bottom. So if there is an event with the body, it trigger first, then div first, second, and the button third. So it comes from the least specific to the most specific. Let's go and see this example as well. And we'll convert this particular example to the capture phase. And you remember when I was explaining the event listener, I showed you the syntax called event listener, event name, the function, and the third property was the capture phase. So there is a third property. When you pass this property pass this argument as a true, so it means you are telling to the browser or to the code or to the JavaScript, now the event should run in the capture phase. So it should work from top to bottom, not from bottom to top. So to do that, what I'm gonna do here is I'll add a true here, okay, and see how what it does. Okay, so I'm just telling to my browser, okay, one event listener is there that is in the capturing phase. So now if I click here, so it triggered div wrapper clicked. it was clicked, and then div wrapper clicked again. Okay, so wait, I'll just remove this to a body wrapper click. Sorry, it was confusing. Okay, let's go again. So if I say it takes the body wrapper clicked, it takes it was clicked, and the div wrapper clicked. So what's happening here is it start running the event from top to bottom, not from bottom to top. Even though I clicked on my button, first it initiate the body listener, because we already define our event should run with the cap string phase. So if I click the button, it say first start from the top. Okay, body has some listener, yes, trigger that. Div has some listener, trigger that. Button has listener, then trigger that. So it's from least specific to the most specific. So this is how the capturing phase work. Let's go back to our slides, and now we'll see how the custom events work. And till now we were using the inbuilt events or the events given by the JavaScript. Now we'll see how the custom event works. And in JavaScript we can create our own custom event using the custom event constructor. And to create that, first we'll create a custom event with or without data. If you want an event that should pass some data, you can do that. If you don't want to pass, or you just want to trigger that, you can create a normal event as well without passing the data. Then once the event is ready, we'll attach that event to a particular element, and after that we'll dispatch an event, so it will trigger that event. Let's go to our playground and see how it works. So I'll remove everything from my code here again. I'll say some events. I'll create a button here, and I'll create another div called with the ID called message. Okay, so first step is create an event, and to do that, first we'll query our both element. We'll say okay, fetch the elements like button or a div tag, and to create an event, the syntax is very simple. We'll take the constructor custom event, then the event name. So we'll say show message as an event name. First property is the event name actually, first argument. Then the second argument is an object that takes many property, and properties are like detail or bubble. You want the bubbling. Another property is bubbles. You want that event bubbling to happen in this event or not, and whether it's cancelable or not, whether you want this event to be cancelled by some other method or not. So you can pass this property. And detail is a special property to this custom event that says you can attach your data to the detail property. So if I say I want to attach the data, and it's an optional. So this second argument is an optional, but I'm creating an event which is passing some data as well. Okay, and I'll say this event as a hello event because it's passing the data hello message, and we are showing calling this message as show message. So event name is show message. Okay, now event is ready, and to trigger that event, we'll say element, that is a button. Button should dispatch that event. So there is a property called dispatch event, and which event you want to dispatch, you will pass that. So the event we have created is the hello event. This is how we create an event, and this is how we pass an event. Okay, but till now we haven't add this event to any listeners. So what we're gonna do is we'll say okay, to my element, to my button, add a listener called click, and whenever somebody click that event, you create a custom event and dispatch that event. Okay, so now we have created an event and we are dispatching an event. I'll write it for you guys. Creation or trigger. You can say we are triggering here the event, and now who gonna listen that event, like what gonna happen once this once this event trigger. So we'll attach another event here. We'll say to the element, to the button, attach another event listener called show message. That is our event name, show message, and we'll call a function, and we first console what is the data is coming, and we can say whatever the data is coming, show in this div called with the id message. So I'll repeat it, it's a bit confusing, so I'll repeat it from starting. We create a button, then we say we query the button, we fetch the button element. On the button element, we add a event listener click. So whenever somebody clicks the button, within that event handler we are creating a custom event called show message. That show message is passing the data hello message. And always remember, in the custom event there is a property called detail. There only we attach the data. It can be an object, it can be an array, it can be a string. And once the event is ready, we are triggering that event. So as soon as I click the click me button, immediately there is another event handler that is listening to that. The event that we create is show message. So immediately the show message gets clicked or triggered, and it will receive the event, and using event.detail we can fetch the data that they are passing, and that data we are just printing on the screen in the div tag. Okay, so if I click me now you'll see as soon as I click me, the custom event create, custom event dispatch. As soon as it dispatches, the add event listeners listen. Okay, that show message has been triggered. Immediately it print the data that we are passing from that event hello message, and immediately it shows on the screen hello message. This is how custom event works. Okay, it's pretty simple. And just remember the syntax detail. This was also in the exam. And the second argument is the object. So always remember we are passing the properties in the key value pairs. Okay, let's go back to our slide. Now we'll see event objects, and we'll see when the event occurs. So like when I click something, the browser pass an event object to the event handler. Like just now we fetch event.detail, right? Likewise we have many property, or we called it like within the event object we have many properties available. So some of the commonly used, or maybe in the exam you face, are the current target, that is the current element on which event is firing. Then we have the prevent default, that cancel the default behavior for the event. Then there is a stop propagation, when you don't want your event to propagate either a capturing phase or a bubbling phase. Then there is a target, that target and that gives the target element on which the event occurred. And there is a type property that gives us the type of event that is fired. And the event property, this is a note, the event property is only accessible inside the event handler. Once all the event handler have been executed, the event object is automatically destroyed. So let's go to our playground again and quickly have a look. So let's clean this code quickly. So I'll keep my button. Okay, and now we are talking about event object, and you already know how to add that event. So we'll say first we'll query that button equal to document dot query selector, and we call using a button, and to this button we'll add add event listener, and we are listening to a click event name, and the callback. And now we are saying every event trigger or the every event listener will listen to the event object. I'll receive an event object. This is the event object. It has many properties always. If I print it here, let's see what all properties do we have. Now I clicked in console. You can see I have thousands of properties here, like not thousands but hundreds, I would say. And there are some nested as well. There are many nested values. So let's see the some common one. The first one is the current target. So if I click here, it says okay, my current target is click me. That's good. Now I'll go and print the other one, the target property. And now if I click, it also gives me the click me. So what is the difference between the target and the current target? To understand that, I'll attach another event listener to the body tag. So I'll say body and listen to the body, and we'll attach this event handler to our body tag. I'll say okay to the body tag, listen to the click and tell me the click handler as well as the target. Okay, so I'll say current target and the target. Now I'll comment this one for time being. I'll remove this. Okay. Now if I click, my current target that has the actual listener is the body tag, and where I clicked, from where I trigger, that is the target. So now the confusion is clear, I guess. So the target property gives us where the click action happen, and the current target gives us the element where the listener is attached. Okay, so these two properties are pretty common and confusing. So let's go to the next one, that is when default, and one of the most commonly used property in real time. And let's go and create some link in our code. I'll go with the same link like Google. I created a link called Google, and on click of that we are usually navigating. If I click here, we are navigating to the google.com. That's the default behavior of hashtag. But if I want to prevent that behavior, then I can use the prevent default property. So I am querying the element link, and on that I'm attaching an event listener called click. So I'm saying whenever the click event happen, first console the click is done and stop the default behavior of that link. So for that we have event dot prevent default property. Okay, so now if I click Google, you can see it's not navigating to google.com, and it's trigger that method and showed in the console it's clicked. So this is the way to prevent default on the behavior. So default way of preventing the default behavior. The things to remember here is in the exam, prevent default does not stop the event propagation like event bubbling or if capturing. Okay, it's only stop the default operation. So you can remember this. Add the note for you. Note that prevent default method does not stop the event from bubbling up the DOM, but stop the default operation. Okay, so let's move on to the next topic, that is stop propagation. Now we saw earlier how the events propagate from bubbles or capture phase. Now how we can stop that? So let's go and first fetch these elements. We already have a button and the body. I'll say btn equal to document dot query selector, and I'll say fetch the button hash, and then I'll say fetch the body as well. We have fetched the element. Now we'll attach an handler to a body as well as to a button. When the body click will print in the console. If the button click will in the console, and it's a parent child relation. So if I click the button, by default the bubbling phase triggers. So when I click the button, first it should print button clicked, and after that it should print body clicked, because the event will propagate. Okay, so if I click here, you can see button clicked and body clicked, but I want to stop this behavior. So to do that, there is a method called stop propagation, and for that you just need to add this property event.stop propagation. And now if I click the button, this event listener will trigger and it sees, okay, there is a stop propagation, I should stop the propagation of the event. Now you can see only in the console you can see the button clicked, there is no console for the body clicked. So this is how this method works. Events object, there are many, you can play around with it, but these are the common and the helpful from the exam as well as interview point of view. Let's go back to our slide. So the next topic is browser object model. So till now we have seen document object model. There is another topic called browser object model. So the browser object model is used to interact with the browser. So how you can interact with the browser? Till now you were interacting with the JavaScript document, but browser gives us some APIs to play around with the browser. So the BOM provide you with the object that expose the web browser functionality, and the default object of browser is window, which means you can call all the functions of the window by specifying the window directly. As you already seen in our previous videos, there is the root object called window, and window is gives us the API to play around with the browser objects. Okay, so window is further divided into document, then screen, then navigator, then location, and the history. Let's go to the first one, that is window API. So the window API, the most commonly used ones, the alert, confirm, prompt, set timeout, set interval, local storage, and session storage. So alert message we already seen, it display an alert dialog. Confirm display a model dialog with a question. Prompt gives us also a sort of alert, but it's take the user input as well. Then we have a set timeout that sets the timer and execute the callback function once the timer or the time expires. Then we have a set interval that is opposite of timeout. It just call the function again and again after a particular delay. Then we have a storage properties called local storage and session storage. The local storage stores data with no expiration date, and the session storage store the data for the one session. Let's go to our playground and see how it works. I'll clean this. I'll clean this as well right now. So we are good with the fresh code. So first was the display and alert dialog. So that was the dialog. You can use window dot alert as well. And if I say hello, when the code loads, it triggers the alert. And without window also, it will go and search the method in the window object. Okay, so without window also it will work. I'll go to the next property, that is the confirm box. So the confirm box also, you can write window dot or without window as well, because by default if method you write, it search that method in the window object. So we'll say confirm. Are you sure you want to delete something? There is a message usually, and we store that result because the user will say yes or no, okay or cancel. And we'll say if the result is yes or true, it returns the result in form of true or false. If true, you click the OK button, otherwise you click the cancel button, and we'll print that message in the console. And let's refresh this page. Now you see it's saying, are you sure you want to delete? If I say cancel, it says you click the cancel button because we are using the ternary operator. So it says you click the cancel button. If I refresh it again, if I say OK, it says you click the OK button. This is how confirm box work. Then there is a prompt API. Prompt also work without window or with window. So we'll say we want to create a prompt. Prompt takes the input from the user. So what is your name? So you can see here the prompt is coming that said type your name. And we'll say if you type whatever you type, change it to lowercase. If it is Nikhil, print yes, otherwise no. And in console, I'll print feedback. Okay. So I'll cancel it for time being. I'll refresh the page again, and I'll say, so the prompt is here. If I type Nikhil and say OK, now you can see it's printing yes, because we are saying what we are creating a prompt with what is your name, and whenever you type Nikhil, it print yes, otherwise it's no. So if I refresh it again and I'll say no, not no, I'll give some other name, Salesforce, and then it prints no, because the word that you have entered in the prompt is not Nikhil. So this is all about prompt. Now let's go to the most commonly used API of web, that is timeout. And in the exam it definitely gonna come, set timeout. So we'll say first we'll write the method and then I'll explain you how it works. So set timeout take callback function, the time after which this callback should trigger, and the argument. So this is the syntax. And callback, we already know, when a function pass as an argument to another function. So site timeout is itself a function and we are passing another function to it. Okay, so we'll write a function. Let's say set timeout. Alert itself is a callback and will not pass the calling bracket because it will call automatically. So we'll just pass the executor, that is a function that gets triggered after 3 seconds, and we pass the argument to this function, say set timeout demo. So what it gonna do is it alert set timeout demo in the alert. Okay, and it's better we create the button as well. On click of button, we'll try to trigger this alert. On click, create a function called show alert. I'll move this set timeout inside the show alert. On this, I'll refresh the browser now. Now we have the click button on the screen. So if I click on it, it show me the alert after 3000 milliseconds. So this is the time in the millisecond after which this function should trigger. And this is the argument that I'm passing to my function alert. Okay, to my callback alert specifically. So if I click here, now we'll wait for three seconds, and after 3 seconds, it trigger the alert. So we already know callback is a function to be executed after the time expires. So once 300 milliseconds or 3 seconds is over, then this function gets triggered. And delay is the time in millisecond that the timer should wait before executing the callback function. If you omit it, the delay default is 0. An argument passed to the callback function as a third parameter here. Okay. Now we have seen how to create the set timeout, but sometime we want to cancel it as well. Like we already set the timer, but we want to cancel the timer as well. To do that, you need to create a global variable, and you have to store the set timeout into that global variable. So this set timeout function return a timeout ID, which is a positive integer, identify the timer created as a result of calling the method. Okay, so we'll use this method and we'll try to cancel that. And to cancel it, I'll create another method cancel. I'll give this name cancel alert, and I'll create a function cancel alert, and we'll print cancel successfully when we called it. And before that, we'll say there is a property called clear timeout, and you need to call that clear timeout, and you need to pass the timeout ID. So timeout ID will pass to clear timeout, and it will check the ID in his pool where he's storing the timeouts, and it cancel the timeout. Okay, so we'll try it first. I'll click it. After 3 seconds, it will trigger the alert. So it trigger the alert. Now if I click cancel, so it cancel the alert. And now if I click and cancel, now it will not trigger any alert. So what I did is, first I click it start the timer. Before 3 seconds, I click the cancel. Now the alert will not pop up because we clear the that timeout that we have set. So this is how timeout works. And we commonly use timeout to show a demo of asynchronous call as well, just to give the delay to our function. Okay, so we have seen the timeout. Now we'll see the set interval. So set interval is a little bit similar to set timeout, but here signature is same, but the functionality is different. So in set interval, the callback function called repeatedly with a fixed delay between the each call. So what happened here is, we'll create a fresh demo. I guess that's better. I'll remove this, and I'll create a function start that create a set interval, and I'll give my callback name toggle color, and I'll say just call this function after 1 second every time. So 1 second call this, next second call this. So let's create this function as well. So this function gets called every second, and here what we're gonna do is, I'll create a text here. If hello everyone, and I'll give an ID here, and now here I'll call that text document dot query selector. I'll pass that ID text. Once I get the reference, I'll say event dot style dot color. Set if event dot color is already red, if already red, make it blue, and if blue, make it red. So we are using a ternary operator and setting the value of the color, and we'll start this on click of a button. uh, we'll say start. So what we are doing is we are saying we click the start button, we start the time interval. So this time interval, call this callback toggle color every second, and this toggle color will change the color of this text from red to blue and blue to red every second. Okay, so let's start this. So first second red, second blue, then red, then blue, then red, then blue. So this is how set interval works. And there is also a need, we want to cancel that set interval. Let's create the stop function here, that also cancel using the interval id. So we'll store interval id in the interval id variable, and I'll define the interval variable as a global variable. And to cancel it, here also like a set timeout interval, set timeout, we have a clear interval. So there it was clear timeout, here it's a clear interval as a property, and as a method that takes the interval id. And once you call this function, it stop the calling of this callback using set interval. Okay, so let's go to stop and say stop. Now if I click start, it triggers the set interval, and every second the colors change. But if I click stop, and as I click stop, it stop calling that callback function. So this is how our clear interval and set timeout work. And then we have another property called local storage. So local storage is commonly used to store some information in the browser, and that's remain there until unless you explicitly delete that data. Even though you close the browser, it remains there until unless you go and delete it explicitly. Okay, so there is a method on the window, you can call it as window.local storage, or you can call it without local storage as well, like we did for other. So this is also an API of window. First we'll see how to save the data to local storage. So we are saying the first step as saving data to a local storage, we call the local storage. There is a method called setItem that takes a key name by which you want to store. So I said store the data as a code and store the value as 1 2 3 4 5. So now it stored the data, and if you want to see how where it's stored, I'll go to the application. In the browser there is a option called local storage, and you click that, you will see the code 1 2 3 4 5 is stored in the browser. Now we'll see how to reading data from the local storage. Second step is once you store, how you will read it. To read it, you need a variable that caches that. Once you pull that data from the local storage, and to get that, you need to call a method called getItem, and in which you need to pass the key name by which you were storing earlier. So while storing, we set the key name is code. While retrieving, just pass the key name, it retrieve the data. And if I print it, I'll go back to my console, and you can see it's retrieving the code. So this is how you reading the data from the local storage. And the third thing is removing the data from the local storage. In the exam, there was a question related to local storage. So remember the syntax, especially for setting, how to set, how to get, and always remember local storage store the data in the string format. Even though if it's an object like name colon value, you need to convert into a string using json.stringify and then store this data to a local storage, and while retrieving you need to convert into an object using json.parse. So to remove this, we were seeing remove, there is a API called remove item, and now if I call local storage remove item and pass the code, it will get removed from the local storage. So if I go there, you'll see nothing is there. This is how local storage work. Similarly, there is a session storage. So if you want to set some session related tokens or the code, you it's prefer to go with the session storage. Session storage also work in the same way. Instead of local storage, you just need to call session dot storage, and first is saving data to session storage dot set item. All names are same, only the functionality is different. So in this case, for storing you just set the item, for retrieving you get the item, for removing remove the item. The only difference between session storage and the local storage is session storage delete the data as soon as you close your tab or the browser, but local storage keep it until unless you explicitly remove the data. So this is how it works. Let's go back to our slides. So we already covered the local storage, session storage. So local storage objects store data with no expiration date. The data will not be deleted when the browser is closed and will be available the next day, week, or year. The session storage object store data for only one session. Data is deleted when the browser tab is closed. So we have seen the Windows API. We have seen the set timeout, how it works, how set interval works. Let's go to the next one. Now we'll go to the location API. Location API manipulate the location of the document via the location object. And for this, let's go and see all these methods. So let's go back to our browser. And so for this, we need a new tab. I'll open a code here, a random URL. So it's a URL of Visual Studio Code. So this URL has many things. The main URL, then you have query parameters and all. So we'll see how location works. So okay, so there is a property called or API window dot location. We can call it dot window dot location, or you can call simply location. So location API, we are talking about location API. If I type location and enter, you will see it gives us a lot of properties with some values. So we'll see some common properties, commonly used properties. So first one is location.href. Location.href return the URL of the current page. So if I hit enter, you can see it just return me the actual URL of the page. Then we have location.hostname. It returns the domain name of the web host. So domain name is marketplace.visualstudio.code. Then we have location.pathname. So it returns the path and the file name of the current page. So the path is the slash item, and that is the current path of the page. After that, we can see whether it's an HTTPS or HTTP protocol using location.protocol. And you can load the new document using location.assign. So if you want to change the URL, you can call this method and pass a URL where you want to navigate. So I'm saying location.assign, change this existing location to a google.com, and if I hit enter, you'll see it automatically navigate to google.com. So now here is a google.com. So this is all about the most commonly used properties of the location API. So let's go to the another one, that is Navigator API, or we call it Navigation API. So window.navigator object contain information about the visitor browsers. So it gives a lot of information related whether you are online or offline, what's your geolocation, what's your language, app name, code name, version name, browser name. So let's go and quickly see some of the commonly used one. So here again in the code, you can write simply first navigator. That is an API. It's easily accessible. It's an object. I want to see what's the language of this page. In Google, it's English. It return me the code of the language. If I want to see dot online, whether I'm online or not, yes, I'm connected to an internet. That's why it's saying navigator.online is true. The third one that most commonly and heavily used in real time, that is geolocation. And to test that, we'll write a function geolocation, and within that function we are just calling our navigator API, navigator.geolocation, and that has a method called watch position, and that returns us the position, the current position of our machine, I would say. And I'm calling that method now. So if I hit enter, and I need to allow this first for the tracking, just give me a second. Actually, I have stopped my location for Google. I'll go to my actual page here. I'll can access. So if I type the same function here and I hit enter, now you will see my browser is asking about my location. Allow. If I say yes, and it returns me the geolocation position with some coordinate, my latitude, my longitude, accuracy, altitude, and every all values it returns. So this is how the navigator geolocation works. That's a high level. This was not in the exam, just for a topic point of view. Let's go to our browser. Then we have a screen API, and the screen object or API provides the attribute of the screen on which the current window is rendered, and it returns the screen orientation as specified in the screen orientation API. So let's go and see quickly the demo of this as well. So there are many properties you can access. So if I type dot and I'll say orientation, screen is my browser screen. So screen dot orientation, it gives me the orientation value, angle is 0, and type is landscape primary. Similarly, from the screen you can find the height of my screen. If I type, it says your screen height is 1080 pixel. So it represents the pixel height of the screen. So let's go back to our slides. So last one is the history API. History object contain the URL visited by the user, and within the browser or a window, the history object contain the URL visited by the user. So in LWC actually, so the history object is commonly used as like navigation mixin, and it's usually store your all history, which all pages you have visited, and that's how the browser get to know when you click on back button which page he has to navigate on, click on forward button which page he has to go forward. And there are some commonly used method is like back, forward, go, and length. So let's go and see this in a live demo. So this also I'll see here. And so we are talking about history. If you type history, you can see it's returning the length. It means you have two history. You already visit the two paths. So we'll say okay. So in our browser also you can see we have only the forward button, like actionable back button is not available. So we'll say first history dot forward and call the function. And I hit enter, it's almost similar to the pressing this button, the forward button. And we visited earlier to a google.com, so it's moved the history to the google.com. And now if I want history dot back, it takes us back to the page. Then there is another method called go, and just give me a second, I'll remove this code. Okay, so there is a method called go. So if it takes an argument which page you want to go, if there is a valid number, then it takes to that particular page. If I give -1, it takes to the back. If I give 1, it's equivalent to history dot forward. If I give 0, it refreshes the page. If I say 1, it will take to the forward screen. It takes us to the google.com. And if I say -1, it takes backward the back screen. And if you have some length of history like 6 7 pages you already visited, you can directly go to that page by giving that number. So right now we don't have history of 6, so it does nothing. So this is all about our history API, and I guess we have covered almost everything. So let's quickly go to the exam outline and see what we have covered. So today we covered in the session 3 browsers and event, that is of 17%. So we learn different types of events, event handler, and how it propagates the event. Then we'll see what is DOM and how to manipulate the DOM with query selector, get element by ID. Then we have seen browser, how to use the browser go back buttons and all. The dev tool we more learn about in the debugging. That's why I didn't cover it. And then we utilize the browser specific API like setTimeout, setInterval. Then we have seen history API, location API, navigator API, and we covered everything. And thanks for your time. If you have any doubt or any query, you can ask me in the comment. And if you feel somewhere I'm going wrong, you can highlight that. I would love to correct my knowledge. And I hope after the first 3 sessions you are feeling confident for clearing the exam. And next session we'll learn about the debugging skills, and that is pretty handy in real time scenarios when you are in the project. And thanks for your time. Have a great day.